Before I begin, I do want to say a few words about this tragic shooting that took place this morning in Winder, Georgia. We're still gathering information about what happened, but we know that there were multiple fatalities and injuries. And, our hearts are with all the students, the teachers, and their families, of course. And we are grateful to the first responders and the law enforcement that were on the scene. But this is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive. It's senseless. It is. We've got to stop it.
You woke? It's time to get up. Hello and welcome to Thought You Were Woke, No Speed Limit Podcast. I'm your host, Alvin. I hope you guys are having a terrific day. I just want y'all to do one thing. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, make sure that you're hitting that follow button and the notification button so that the next time the show is available, you will be the first to see it. Now, I hate to come back with a very disturbing show. We're going to talk about the Appalachian school shooting today. It's a sad story. It really is a sad story. Unfortunately, 4 people died. And most of you probably already know this. Christian Angola, 14-year-old student, and Mason Schumerhorn, 14, were both students at the school. Richard Aspinwall, the assistant football coach, the defensive coordinator for the football team, also died, and Christian Ermy, 51. Both of them were also math teachers. Unfortunately, they lost their lives, and to be honest with you, I'm sure the students at the school will never be the same again. We also know that 9 people were wounded. 1 teacher and 8 other students were also wounded. The shooter turned himself in, who happened to be a student at the school. His name was Colton Gray. He's 14 years old. His father was later arrested also for providing the weapon that Colt used to commit this crime. Colin Gray, who's 54. So, how do we go about talking about this story? Well, the facts in the case are pretty disturbing at the most. So, if we look into this case, we have to start with the shooter and the life that he lived. Why does his father end up being arrested? For one, Colt Gray was going through the fact that the traumatic experience of losing his mother, who separated from his father. They were, I guess, his father had sole custody of Colt at the time. Also, his mother, from what I understand, from reading a couple of news articles, may have had a drug problem, because there's some stories that are saying that the young lady in question was abusing drugs. In fact, that she had been arrested several times on charges of methamphetamines. Now, she stated that Colin Gray, the father, had been abusive and had suffered abuse in his life as well. There are some other things here that indicate that there were real problems in the home. There were neighbors who claim that child services had been called to the house several times. The police had been to the house several times. And there was a lot of abuse in that family. One fact is for sure, a year before any of this happened, the FBI and the county police were concerned about some posts on a website that Colt Gray, a video game site that Colt Gray was involved in, that he had made some threats to the school. His father denied that he knew anything about it. And then he said, if he did, I sure as heck would take care of that. And he said, and they asked, does Colt have access to weapons? The father said, yes, he has access to weapons. He said, we do go hunting, and he showed the officers pictures of them hunting. One of them would have been a disturbing picture to me, but to him it wasn't. It was his son standing there after he killed the deer with deer blood on his face. For whatever reason, there was not enough evidence. And I say this, if any of that other stuff was going on, child services coming to the house, the fact that the mother that was separated, the father says he worked all the time. So that means, did he have enough time to be around Colt to know what Colt was doing? The mother was not at home. They had separated. Apparently, she may have had a drug problem. Colt's father may have been abusive. And all those are may have. I don't know if those are actually facts. These are things that are coming out in different articles about that particular family. However, the police the police later dropped it. According to Colt, he didn't. He no longer went on this particular video game site. That the account was old. He said his account got hacked. He only used TikTok to watch videos. He didn't even make videos on TikTok. And after their investigation, the police basically dropped the case. But they did warn Colin Gray while they were investigating to make sure that the child had no access to weapons and that the child did not go to the school. Now, once his investigation was over, Cole, of course, was allowed to go back to school. And his father, for some reason, that Christmas decided to purchase him an AR-15. That's after all of this just happened. The father decides to purchase the child an AR-15. Again, the disturbing information about this is that the father may have been abusive, may have been the type of father that thought certain things were okay, and they weren't okay. So, choices here are some of the things. And also, like I said, the mother, who was not arrested because she did not commit a crime, I didn't even mention her name here, was involved in this case. So all of these things are disturbing. But what's also disturbing is the failure of authority. Imagine you find out that a young man whose house they have been calling protective services to, his father says that he had suffered some bullying at school. His mother is no longer at the home. There may have been drug abuse and alcohol abuse at the home. You've got all of this information probably in a file somewhere. You can't do anything about it, but you need to keep a real close eye on this particular student. You need to warn the school about this particular student, that he may be a problem. However, because of the failures here in this particular case, here we are talking about 4 people who have died and 9 people who have been wounded by this particular individual, Colt Gray. And we have to look and deep dive into how society is reacting to this and what should we do next. We always talk about there are things that we need in society to help. This is a perfect example of a person falling apart. Here's something I didn't tell you about the Grays. Apparently, there was an eviction in 2022 where they lost their home. Colin Gray claims he paid the rent, but he said he was the sole provider of the home and was struggling to take care of the family, and that's what caused the breakup between him and his wife, because he had been kicked out of the house. So I don't know if they interviewed the mother or not. That information is not here. We do, but like I said again, we do know how the young man acquired the weapon, because his father gave it to him. Even though his father claimed he had no access to the weapons without his supervision, somehow this young man was able to take this assault rifle all the way to school. I don't know if he rides the bus or if he just walks to school every day. I have no earthly idea of this. And then the fact that his father said that he sometimes suffered some bullying. All of this is triggers, red flag warnings. The problem is there's no red flag for a young man. The red flag would have been for the father with all these guns, who supposedly, quote unquote, abusive and separated from the mother. That's where the red flag laws would have came in. So what the sheriff would have done is taken the guns from the house, removed them from the house, so they didn't have those weapons. However, since this case was considered closed, those weapons probably either came back, and then the father then turned around and was able to purchase a weapon. However, looking at this case, it looks like as if the father, as if the authorities failed. We always talk about needing resources. I know people want to think we harp too much on Second Amendment rights, but Second Amendment rights is this: the gun doesn't kill people by itself. The people who use the gun, who operate that gun, kill people. That's why we have to scrutinize. It's like a car. A car parked in a driveway is harmless to individuals on the street until somebody gets behind the wheel and doesn't know what they're doing, or decides that they're not going to follow the laws of the road. Then the car is dangerous because of the person within it. We always talking about guns are dangerous. People are dangerous. Let me explain something. Political rhetoric does not help this situation either. There has been a lot of rhetoric going on right now. It is easy to say, okay, well, it's disturbing that this happened, and what it is we need to get rid of guns. Guns are the problem. Guns. And yes, they are the problem because this isn't the only crime we're talking about. We're talking about a mass shooting, but every day on the streets of America, young Americans, and I do say this, Americans are killing Americans. It is also not. It is also not conducive to be the other side and try to blame everything else but this. I need to show you guys something. So there's several disturbing articles, like I said, about the young man, but this article right here, this is disturbing to me. Reason why I say it's very disturbing to me is look here, look at the headline. Harris quick to call for gun control after Georgia shooting stayed mum on armed Venezuelan migrant gangs. I have a huge problem with this particular article. It's by Fox, of course, Fox News. Some call it the false news. And this story, actually, this Venezuelan story, turns out to be false. So what it is according to this particular story, there's Venezuelan gangs that have taken over apartment complexes in Colorado. Now, according to the authorities there, in other articles, this particular situation did not occur. It has not occurred. What has happened is that the particular landlord at this particular building has decided that in order to escape punishment for what he has done, he claimed that Venezuelan gangs took over his apartment complex. Also, there is a problem with Venezuelan gangs, but it's very minor. That's beside the point. This article itself is disturbing because the story is about the Georgia school shooting and how do we handle the Georgia school shooting. However, for some reason, Fox News has decided to take this and make it a political about Venezuelan street gangs. And that is called insensitivity to the actual issue at hand. And this is what I have a problem with. There's no easy way to talk about this particular story. There's no easy way to say what was the problem, how do we fix it. But we see some disturbing facts in the case of this particular situation. One, Colin Gray, the father, apparently was abusive. The mother was strung out on drugs. They were separated. Colt was living in these particular conditions as part of this family. He was also suffering some abuses at school because he was dealing with the fact of all these things going on at home. Stressors, all stressors. So at the same time, we got to deal with the failures of our authorities, of the police department, of child protective services, and all those other people that could have helped out in this particular situation that seem to overlook the things or did not do a good job of investigating or working together. We need child protective services, the police and authorities to work together to fix a problem like this in this case. But this is when we talk about that we need better mental health in this country. We need better social work in this country. We need uh, better coordination between these particular groups, because in these situations, because violence is happening everywhere, and I mean not just mass shootings. We're talking about violence in the streets, and it's not by Venezuelan gangs. It's Americans on Americans. You turn on the news every day, there's a murder somewhere in your state, and it's not necessarily somebody from a foreign country. It is somebody from right here in the United States. Most crimes that are committed by foreigners from other countries are committed against their own people, and the vice versa. Americans commit crimes over exceeding 80 to 90% of all crimes committed in the United States are committed by Americans. So stories like this are very, very disturbing, extremely disturbing. Yet we got to see this over and over and over again, because it becomes very political when we come to talking about mass shootings. It's about guns on one side, it's about the liberals with their scary tactics on the other side, and it's foolish. Foolish when we're not concentrating on the problem. Everything about this case, everything about this situation shows that we need practical solutions to violence in this country, because if you look at the lives of most of the people who end up in violent situations, economics, drugs, psychological, family problems, education, all of those come to a factor in how we have to deal with a person that becomes a violent person. And if we're lacking in some of those areas, like I live in the state of Alabama, the first thing they want to do here is build new prisons. That's going to solve the problem. We build more prisons, we lock more people up, and the more you lock up, they'll get the idea that they can't commit the crime. That's not mental health. We understand what insanity is: doing the same things over and over and over again, expecting a different result. We've been locking people up for 200, almost 200 years in a prison for crimes like that, for violent crimes. And what has been the result? It's only grown more and more and more. It's time to do something different. It's time to do something different. It's time to stop looking at situations like this and thinking that any of the things and the way we think is okay. So then we ask ourselves, what are the solutions? First of all, we have to get the two groups together and sit down and decide what are good solutions, because apparently part of the problem here seems like none of the agencies work together the way they should. If child protective services had been involved with Colt and Colin at some point, child protective services should have been called in when the police came to interview Colt and his father. Um, if the problem is that the child protective services have been overworked, considering that the situation is pretty bad, and there allegedly the mother had been arrested for using meth and had drug problems, and police have been called to the house several times, the child protective services should have been present. Um, Maybe some counseling should have been available at the time, and maybe the resource was not to let this child go back to this particular school in the first place. Maybe the idea was maybe the child needs to get in juvenile custody at the time, have a psychological evaluation of the young man, and see what was going on. But instead, what happened was FBI sits down, they do an interview, they do what they normally do, they look for evidence of something, they can't find evidence of anything, they can't violate a person's constitutional rights, so they let it go. But again, like I said, some of the elements of that, even that conversation were disturbing between the father, and the FBI. So again, if we can have the departments that should be working together, if our solution is, first of all, this is no offense to police officers or anyone else, they are not trained properly to be counselors or to deal with social issues or family issues, but they often find themselves in those situations trying to handle domestic issues, trying to stop things from happening. Yeah, they're given crisis management, but they can't prevent people from slipping through the cracks, or in this case, this young man's father making a stupid decision 6 months after he's talked to the police about his own son buying an AR-15. These are the kind of things that, like I said, counseling was needed. Maybe there were some other things that were needed at the point of intervention when they were talking to the police that maybe a psychiatrist or a psychologist could have seen, even a social worker could have seen at that point. But those things were not available. It was just to sit down with the FBI and the county police. And then they did their work and said, oh, there was no problem here, and we moved on. So now here we are a year later. 4 people are dead, 9 others injured because of an overlook or not using what we call red flags. And of course, Georgia doesn't have a red flag law. It's a gun-happy, gun-toting state. We can get into all those disturbing things about the particulars of that and why red flag laws are necessary and things that could have been done to prevent this. You know, people say, hey, you guys talk about defunding the police. It's not defunding the police. What it is, it's allocating funds to things like mental health and social work, because there is a shortage in this country of social workers. Education is important because we're not just talking about mass shootings. We're talking about shootings nationwide in homes that are broken, often broken. There are no 2 parents at home. There's no contact with the father and the mother. Or there's some other psychological issues going on, and those things are not being taken care of. Most crimes in the United States are domestic in nature. That is, that most people commit a crime with people they know. And these are the things that we really have to look at. And there's no simple solution to this problem. I'm just giving you some ideas here that we could use to fix the problem that we seem to be lacking in understanding. Yes, guns kill people, but people use the guns to kill people. Guns by themselves can't kill people. It is a weapon of war. It's a weapon used to hunt. It has a purpose, but it strains the fascination in our nation with this particular object and how it is used. Well, folks, I'm all out of time. Just remember to like, share, and subscribe. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And if you have a comment, please leave it below. I will also show you some of my other videos. I do have one about the original Michigan shooting, and also another one that details some stories about some other mass shooters. I will leave those in the comments for you. Y'all have a wonderful day. Peace.
You have been listening to Thought You're Awoke No Speed Limit Podcast.